So we have one of Seth's 200Ts, and I don't know if you can hear this or not, but something in there is sloppy. Not in and out sloppy. Okay, side to side sloppy. Bad. So radio play is bad. The in and out, no problem. Now, one of my subscribers, John K., seems to think that the case itself is wallowed out, not the bearing. So we're going to take this apart and see. Now, I've got some of the case bolts out here, but most of these are still to be done. I think that's it for case bolts. 2 up here, 1, 2, 3, here, here, here. So now, before I try to pop the case, I'm going to take the cylinder head off. There we go. Probably not the ideal way to split a case. Now you don't want to take the screwdriver and stick it in here. That'll really wreck something. Actually, up here you can, because up here we're not as worried about the seal. Either way, you'll notice with the threebond, with the 1184, this case, the gasket splits. Check that out. The gasket itself splits. Alright, so let's take the crank out. That just falls right out. The crank looks pretty good. Put that off to the side. Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, the threebond, I mean, it'll split a case half, or a case gasket. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Just comes apart. Looks like it's sealed pretty good then. Anyway, so will these bearings come out? Are they wallowed out in the case? Is the case half wallowed out? No. Not this one. Unfortunately, I have to pull the ignition coil, which I really would rather not do, but I guess we got to do it. Ignition coil. Now, really, what I'm aiming for here is you release it, release the ground, the ground wire, and then you basically have to undo the ignition coil from here. Do the ignition coil wire, pull the coil out, then you can pull at least that part out. Cool. At least for now, pull that. Good. Relatively easy to pull the oil line out, might as well do that. And now you can clean your case halves. I do think something's up with those bearings. I just do. Guess we'll find out. Pull the seals out. Boing. Good. See, this bearing looks like it was well seated in the pocket, so no issue there. Just bearings that ran out of spec, I guess. Really no other good explanation for it. Sorry, John. I don't see a wallowed case half here. If I did, you'd knock it like that and the bearing would fall out. It's not doing that. It's pretty stoutly in there. Gonna have to hit that with the heat and tap it out. Let's hit this with the heat. Well, all the balls came out. But not the inner race, or outer race. I assure you the case half is not wallowed. I'm going to try this one a little bit differently. Let's pull the seal out. Let's try some good old-fashioned threaded rod action here. Some threaded rod. Just a socket. We've got a big socket on the other side, which is where the bearing will go into. A whole pile of washers. Like a pile of washers. And a 5/16 nut. 5/16 nut here. Got a 1/2 inch. Thing here. Let's see. Oh. Well, I'll tell you what, that was super easy. Not because this is wallowed, this is not. There's nothing wrong with this inner surface. But that was a super easy way to press that out. Ha! So, this is actually 5/16, not 3/8. 3/8 is too big. 5/16 threaded rod. Nut. Some washers. This is actually a 3/8 socket, but it's pretty narrow here, so it fits perfectly. So this fits perfectly in just inside the cage. The nylon cage is in there. Kind of splayed that a bit, but that's perfect. So now what I have to do is I effectively have to rebuild the cage on the other bearing so I can use this same technique to get it out. So what I've done is kind of akin to the peanut butter trick. I refilled the outer race with effectively ball bearings. Now these aren't balls, this is a roller bearing, so I don't know if this is going to work quite the same way that the ball bearing did when I was trying to remove the outer race that was stuck. But let's do the same exact thing that I did just 2 minutes ago. So I repacked that with rollers from the other bearing that I just removed. I'm going to place this right here. Actually, yeah, let's place that right there. Whole pile of washers again. 5/16 nut. Centered, centered. You know what, for this, because it doesn't have to go inside the cage, I can use a much bigger socket, so let's use a much bigger socket. Right now, the rollers are just held in by grease. I've just got a whole pile of grease packed in there. That'll be a little more stable. Big socket here to push it into. It's like 30 millimeter, this big, pretty big. Center the socket, center that more or less. Take your 1/2 inch ratcheting wrench, see if this goes. No different than the peanut butter trick. Perfect. Now I just got to get these cleaned up and some new bearings in. New seals, new bearings. And off and running. Got these fairly clean. I've got some OEM bearings. Now these are $23 a shot from Stihl, and they say Germany on them. Let's see if we can put this in with heat. If it'll drop right in, we're good. And I don't know where my heat gun went, so I guess we're doing this by guess and by golly. Pretty hot. See, didn't quite go. Hate that. So I've got the bearing almost in, but I got to pull it in a little further. I got another bearing just as a spacer, a bunch of washers, and again a deep socket as a spacer, just because I have a long piece of rod here. A bunch of washers and a big washer at the bottom, and a 5/16 nut. And crank it on down. That's it. It stops. You go until it stops. So the bearing's in, it's stopped. So if heat fails you, these have inner nylon cages. You really don't want to heat them a second time. I'm just going to put the other one in cold. Not even going to bother with heat. But that is definitely not wallowed out. So the bearing going in, bearing as a spacer. Got to make sure it's lined up. Don't want it not going in straight. If it goes in crooked, you got a problem. No, that looks like it's going in perfectly straight. That's beautiful. Perfect. Let me just make sure this is exactly straight. That's it. Just, that's it. It's in. Your bearing's in. Now, to John K's point, you know, is it a lot easier just to buy new case halves that already have the bearings in them? Yeah, probably. It'll save you a whole lot of time and probably aggravation. But this is a good exercise in academia here, as far as I'm concerned. Kind of interesting to do. Now comes the hard part, putting the seals in. So once we get the seals in here, reassembly here is just vanilla, which I like, by the way, but these are the bakelite seals. For the record, I hate these. Okay, so here's the real trick. I think I got it without damaging anything. So, what did I do? Again, threaded rod, just a spacer here on this side. This is the PTO side, but I'm sure it would work for the flywheel side as well. So, what I had to do was I had to make sure the threaded rod is properly centered in there so I don't damage the bakelite part of the seal. It doesn't. If you stretch it out one way or another, it's going to be permanently stretched. Unlike rubber comes back to more or less its original position repeatedly. Here's the trick. I used a nut in there with the appropriate sized socket to go over it, and the socket drives the seal down, and the nut fits just inside and more or less keeps this centered. Let's see if it did its job. Yeah, that's much better. That's not splayed out at all now. Okay, good. These seals are not necessarily perfect seals, but they're longer lived than the rubber, at least supposedly. That's their intention. So now we've got seals in. This seal's going to be okay. So seals in. Now we just need to put the whole chute together. I didn't even take the piston off the crank here. Get our case gasket out. Brake cleaner, just to double check that we got everything degreased, all the surfaces here. Now, you don't necessarily need to use threebond. You don't necessarily need to use sealer. I do. Obviously, it grabs pretty good. Literally, the case gasket split in two, so I would call that pretty good. So I'm going to get the threebond on here, and then I'm going to let it tack up for a little while, a minute or two. I don't let it tack for that long. Here you don't need lots because, well, you're using a case gasket, remember? Again, let that tack up for a minute. Gives you time to clean up, you know, certain things you don't need anymore, like most of this stuff. So this is tacked up. I got the positioners here, so that's where I put the case gasket down first. And then that's the PTO side, so we're going to do the PTO side. Put the crank in. It'll find home eventually. There we go. Now, we do have this silly wire that's supposed to come through. Put it on through here. Rubber thing here. So there's no pressing here involved necessarily, so it's not like you got to use my crank tools for this. It just goes together just like that. Cool, huh? OEM bearings, OEM seals. Yeah. I'm gonna put this to light torque. Got a bunch of bolts to put down here with blue Loctite. And the top two here I'd put in, but I don't put them down with blue Loctite because I got to pull these off later to put that silly AV mount on. So when you have them down with light torque, now you can go back with your good T-handle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's your case bolts. Oil dip tube goes back. There's your oil dip tube. Now I just got to put the rest of the thing back together. So, I hope this helps some people. I think the most annoying thing for me is these the OEM seals. They are a pain. The OEM 200t seals are a pain. I've broken plenty of them trying to get them in. But I think putting this little nut down in the threaded rod there to line up the threaded rod helps. And then getting the exact right size socket to go on it. Just make sure it's straight, crank it in, and it'll just go right in. So that's the secret there. Okay, I'm going to finish putting this thing together. Thanks for watching, everybody. And, yep, the case was not wallowed out. So, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.